Did you know that in the United States, there are laws that might seem absolutely absurd? Yes, you heard it right. The mighty land of the free and the home of the brave has some laws that might make you chuckle, scratch your head, or even question the sanity of our forefathers. In this light-hearted and entertaining journey, we'll delve into the world of the unusual, the outrageous, and the downright silly. These laws, believe it or not, are still officially on the books, even though they might seem like they belong in a comedy sketch rather than a law book. How do such laws come into existence? Well, they're often the remnants of a bygone era, left untouched and forgotten in the annals of legal texts. But their absurdity gives them a strange immortality, becoming fascinating snapshots of a different time. So, buckle up and get ready to explore the top 5 most absurd laws still on the books in the United States. Starting our countdown at number 5, we have a law from the state of Georgia. This law is not just baffling, but it's one that would make you scratch your head in confusion. Unbelievably, in the state of Georgia, it is illegal to tie a giraffe to a telephone pole or a street lamp. Yes, you heard it right. A giraffe. Now you might be wondering, why on earth would anyone need to tie a giraffe to a telephone pole? And why would there be a law specifically prohibiting this? Well, let's delve into its history and possible reasons for its existence. This law dates back to the early 20th century, a time when traveling circuses were common. The state of Georgia, with its warm climate and wide open spaces, was a popular stop for these shows. Giraffes, being one of the star attractions, were often part of the menagerie. Now imagine you're a circus manager in the early 1900s, and you've got this tall, majestic beast to take care of. Where do you keep it? Well, a telephone pole or a street lamp would seem like a convenient option, wouldn't it? Yet, the lawmakers of Georgia decided this was not acceptable. Perhaps they were concerned about the welfare of the giraffes, or they worried about the public safety issues that a giraffe tied to a street lamp might cause. We can only speculate, but one thing is clear. They felt strongly enough about it to pass a law. The absurdity of this law is what makes it so fascinating. It's a snapshot of a different time, a time when giraffes roamed the streets of Georgia and telephone poles were potential giraffe parking spots. And despite its absurdity, this law remains on the books today. So, if you're in Georgia, think twice before you tie your giraffe to a telephone pole. It might sound like a fun idea, but your long-necked friend could land you in some serious legal trouble. Moving on to number 4, we're heading over to the state of Kansas. Now, you might think of Kansas as the home of Dorothy and Toto, or maybe as the breadbasket of America, but did you know it also has some truly peculiar laws? One such law that stands out for its sheer absurdity is the prohibition of catching a fish with your bare hands. That's right, folks, it's illegal to go noodling in Kansas. For the uninitiated, noodling is a form of fishing that involves plunging your bare hands into murky water and pulling out a slippery, wriggling fish. As bizarre as it sounds, it's a popular pastime in some parts of the United States, but not in Kansas, oh no. This law might seem outlandish, but like most weird laws, it has its roots in some semblance of reason. The rationale behind this law is not entirely clear, but it's believed to be a measure to protect the fish population. Noodling can be harmful to fish, especially catfish, which are often targeted due to their habit of lurking in holes and crevices. Plus, let's be honest, it's not exactly the most sportsmanlike way to catch a fish, is it? Interestingly, this law dates back to the early 20th century, a time when fishing was not just a leisure activity, but a vital source of food for many families. Although times have changed and fishing for survival is less common, this quirky law remains in the books. Now, it's unlikely that the fish police will come knocking if you decide to go noodling. The law is rarely enforced these days, but it's still technically illegal. So, if you ever find yourself in Kansas with an irresistible urge to catch a fish with your bare hands, maybe think twice. It's laws like these that make us scratch our heads and wonder at the strange, often hilarious twists and turns of legal history. So the next time you're planning a fishing trip, maybe stick to the good old-fashioned fishing rod, especially if you're in Kansas. Remember, no bare-handed fishing in Kansas. Coming in at number 3, we have a law from the state of California. Brace yourself, because this one is a real head-scratcher. In the city of Berkeley, it's illegal to whistle for a lost canary before 7 in the morning. Yes, you heard that right, folks. Now you might be wondering, how did such a peculiar law come into existence? Well, it's a bit of a mystery, but there are a few theories floating around. Some say that it was made back in the day when canaries were a popular pet and a common victim of pre-dawn predators. The law was an attempt to prevent unnecessary early morning noise pollution caused by frantic canary owners. Another theory is that this law could have been born out of a dispute between two neighbors. One of them, an early riser and canary owner, would whistle for his lost bird each morning, disturbing the peaceful sleep of the other. The sleep-deprived neighbor, having had enough, could have pushed for this law. Yet, no matter the reason for its inception, the absurdity of this law is undeniable. It's hard not to chuckle imagining a Berkeley resident, looking at their watch, waiting for the clock to strike 7, so they can whistle for their lost canary. But remember, laws, no matter how absurd, are still laws. So if you ever find yourself in Berkeley with a canary that has a penchant for pre-dawn adventures, you might want to keep this law in mind. Or perhaps invest in a GPS tracker for your feathered friend. While the law's original purpose might have been to maintain peace and quiet in the early morning hours, it now serves as a quirky piece of Berkeley history and a reminder of how laws can sometimes evolve from specific, localized situations. So if you lose your canary in Berkeley, you might want to wait until after 7 a.m. to start whistling. And with that, let's move on to our next absurd law. Can it get any weirder than this? Well, you'll just have to wait and see. At number 2, we're looking at a law from the state of Indiana. Now here's a law that might make you scratch your head. In the Hoosier state, it is completely illegal to catch a fish with a firearm. Yes, you heard me right. Using a gun to fish is a big no-no in Indiana. Now let's dive a bit into the history of this peculiar law. It traces back to the late 19th century, when the local fish populations were dwindling due to overfishing. The authorities were under pressure to protect the fish stocks, and they decided to put this seemingly absurd law into effect. The rationale was simple. They wanted to discourage any form of fishing that would result in mass killings of fish. But why specifically target firearms, you ask? Well, back in the day, some folks found it amusing to toss dynamite into lakes and rivers, then shoot at the explosives to create a big bang, which would kill or stun the fish and make them easy to collect. This method, while undoubtedly effective, was also extremely destructive, hence the law. Fast forward to today, and the law still exists, even though dynamite fishing has long since fallen out of fashion. The chances of you seeing someone at your local fishing hole with a rod in one hand and a rifle in the other are pretty slim. But if you ever find yourself fishing in Indiana, remember, leave the firearms out of it. So, leave your guns at home if you're going fishing in Indiana. And finally, the most absurd law on our countdown comes from the state of Alabama. Now this one is a real doozy, folks. Believe it or not, in Alabama, it is against the law to wear a false mustache in church that causes laughter. Yes, you heard that right. Wearing a fake mustache that induces giggles among the congregation is a no-no. This law has its roots in the 19th century, a period when decorum and respect in church were paramount. It's speculated that someone, in a mischievous attempt to lighten the mood, donned a ridiculous mustache, causing a disruption during the service. To avoid such shenanigans, this law was put into place. But let's just pause for a moment and consider the absurdity here. How does one determine if a mustache is indeed false? Is there a mustache police checking the authenticity of your upper lip adornment at the church door? And what if your real mustache is so outrageous it causes laughter? Are you then in violation of the law? The questions are endless. The law itself is an amusing paradox. It aims to prevent laughter in a place of worship, yet its very existence is laughable. It's a beautiful example of the quirks and oddities that can be found in legal systems, not only in the United States, but around the world. So think twice before you decide to wear a funny mustache to church in Alabama. And there you have it, our countdown of the top 5 most absurd laws still on the books in the United States. We've journeyed through the peculiarities of legislation, from it being illegal to tie an alligator to a fire hydrant in Michigan, to the prohibition of whistling underwater in Vermont. We've marveled at the strange law in Georgia, where it's a no-no to tie a giraffe to a telephone pole or street lamp. And who could forget the bizarre law in Alabama that forbids bear wrestling, or the peculiar law in California where it's unlawful to whistle for a lost canary before 7 in the morning. These laws, no matter how absurd they may seem, remind us of the importance of understanding local legislation. They may be bizarre, they may be funny, but they are still legally binding. Remember, no matter how ridiculous they may seem, these laws are still on the books, so it's best to stay informed and avoid any unnecessary legal troubles. Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay legal.